on his definition of game managers versus game changers. Just initially, did you even hear that or have any thoughts on that really quickly?
Yeah, I heard a good portion of the conversation. Do you want to go first or should I go first?
You can go first if you want.
Yeah,
Do you want us to break? Should we tell people what he kind of said these things were really
yeah,
quickly?
go for it. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. I think I wrote it down because I wanted to use kind of like how he described it, because I think everyone's definition of these things are going to be different, and I think for this conversation, it's important to use his words because that's what he's doing. So for a game manager, he said the player has an ability to make the right play at the right time and protects the football at all costs. But he allows others to take over the game. He gave examples of Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, and Tom Brady. Not saying that they're not physically capable of making great plays or that they can't make great plays, but they're not relied upon. Game changers are players that put the team on their back, and that when you think of the team, you automatically think of that quarterback. And then he gave Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow, and Aaron Rodgers. He also went into like truck and trailer metaphors. Do you want me to get into that, or is that too much for right now?
Essentially, short story, he calls players like Mahomes the trucks because they can pull the weight of the team alongside them, whereas players like Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, the game managers, he had four. Purdy, Prescott, Tua, and Jared Goff. He calls them the trailers in that they don't hold the team back, but in a way, it's
They have to be
them
hitched
riding
onto
alongside
something
with
to
the
be
team.
successful.
Exactly. Now, I think when people hear the word game manager, they immediately get defensive, especially when Brock Purdy's put in the range. I think Cam Newton's description, though, was at least it warrants conversation. I think it was a fairly solid description, not regarding the players. I think it's a fairly solid description when you talk about everything up until that truck portion. I think he's right because there are different ways that different players play the game and different ways that different players fit systems. I think Brock Purdy, Dak Prescott, I think they're in a tier much above Jared Goff, in my opinion. So
Yeah.
I think you consider Purdy, Prescott, maybe even you put Tua in that range, maybe Tua one rank below. But I think that those guys, they are good. When you're a system fit, that doesn't mean you're only a system fit, but you can't deny the fact that you are a good system fit because those quarterbacks are. Dak Prescott is playing elite. Cam Newton mentioned that too. He, in my opinion, he might be the front runner. I might put him as the front runner for MVP. And even over the 49ers guys who I've seen every single game, who I both believe are both warranting of MVP consideration. Dak Prescott might be the guy right now, especially if they end up pulling this thing out and getting the one seed. So that, it's intriguing. I think Cam Newton's comments are not wrong for the most part. Now, the place that I don't agree with Cam Newton is the truck and trailer comments, because I don't think that guys like Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott need a pinch onto their offense in order to succeed. I think Brock Purdy and Dak Prescott and those guys can be trucks. They can pull the weight of the offense alongside them. We've seen Prescott do it in the past. He has, a good amount of experience. And sure, he's folded in some key moments in the past. Sure. But I think this year specifically, we've seen him play that well. And while Purdy, we don't have that big of a sample size to where he carries the offense, the fact of the matter is they don't really need him to do that. Maybe they do in the playoffs, and I think that ultimately dictates whether the 49ers win a Super Bowl. We'll see whether that happens. But he's shown us right now no reason not to kind of go along with it. We'll see how it goes in the playoffs. I'm very curious because that's kind of where I initially thought where Purdy might face some issues. But I think that when you talk about Newton's comments, I think that, there is a spin to it because you use the word game manager, and I think people immediately think of that negatively, where Cam kind of mentioned, no, that's not negative. That's more of it is a positive comment.
Also,
And things
did say like he used the word. I wrote this down because he was like in the middle of being like, I don't mean it bad, and then he also was like, he said merely. He said a trailer merely has to be hooked or attached to something to make it go, where a truck pulls their team together and is the reason the team is having success. And I feel like when you use the word merely has like a negative, like that's just like, ugh,
Yeah, that's
right?
where I don't agree with the truck and trailer portion of it. Like I don't,
But
because I
the
don't
initial
believe that's
description
true.
is good.
Yeah, I think that that's fair. I think at least warrants a discussion. I think it does.
I thought the discussion as a whole was definitely worthy. I know some people kind of, that was part of his video, was kind of like defending himself and his ability to even like make the comment, and I think that was kind of ridiculous. I mean, if I can talk about football, I think Cam Newton can talk about football, and I think that he made good points. But I mean, I also think that other people have like the ability to critique his points and poke holes in it. Um, Kurt Warner kind of talked about that. Like, he quote tweeted it and said, "Well, when you're saying game manager, like, do you think that one of these is better than the other?" Like, and I think the answer has to be yes, just given the playmakers that he put in both categories. And Kurt Warner kind of came back and said that he thought that part was more offensive. Um, when talking about game managers, because maybe Kurt Warner considers himself more of a in the game manager style. I don't know why, but he kind of said, he asked the question, do you think one is better than the other? And so I wanted to ask you that. I think just based on the player examples that Cam Newton gave, you would say potentially, but he also put Tom Brady. I mean, Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, Drew Brees, those quarterbacks are, some of the best quarterbacks in the entire NFL history. Tom Brady being the best in NFL history. So when you hear that, you're like, okay, well, teams would want that. What do you think? I also found it interesting. Cam said the reason that one might be more, basically saying one might be better than the other, is because when you go to the draft, which one are teams looking for? Teams are, when they're drafting, they're looking for the next Mahomes, not the next Tom Brady. And I found that kind of bold of him to say. Not saying it's wrong, but I found it bold.
Yeah, I think when you talk about all these comments, there is a distinction. When you bring in Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, those guys, you see a difference, right? There is a difference between quarterbacks like those guys and quarterbacks like Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, the new wave of quarterbacks, because the game is evolving, right? When you talk about it, people don't like the statue and pocket type quarterbacks that may not be able to create off script. I think that's what he points to as game managers, the guys who can execute really, really well on script, and that's all you expect them to do. That's where you bring in system, because system is where you're going through your progressions, you're getting through that offense, and all three systems. When you talk about game managers that I consider in that similar kind of range, you talk about Tua, Dak, and Brock Purdy. I mean, those systems, they elevate your quarterback's play. I mean, regardless of who it is, even if it's Tom Brady behind the helm, it's going to elevate his quarterback play because of how good that system can be. And I think that nowadays, though, I think that comment is true. Look at the quarterbacks that right now, got drafted in the top 5 in this past draft. Anthony Richardson went at 4. Richardson's a guy who's raw as a passer, but a really solid dual threat quarterback who has the ability to create off script with his legs and his arm. You talk about Bryce Young. He's a guy who many thought, could also, his most dangerous ability was the off script ability, his accuracy and being that accurate while off script, at least entering the draft. And then CJ Stroud, he was there as well. And so I think that there is a distinction now when you look at quarterbacks, even in the upcoming draft. The number 1 pick projected, Caleb Williams, is a guy who is known for his off script ability and all of that. You talk about strong arm and you talk about things like that. Tom Brady, Peyton Manning, they aren't necessarily known for their strong arm. They're known for their ability to win. They're known for their ability to be accurate, known for all the other kind of aspects. But now I think teams are kind of shifting towards a different quarterback MO when understanding the change dynamic of the game. That's kind of the way that I look at it. But I also think that in a way, with him saying that, I don't think he's meaning game manager at all in a bad sense.
I agree. And do you think this was a separate conversation? I think when Cam Newton was talking, it was obvious. I mean, he put Brock Purdy in the game manager conversation, but someone, I think it was from NFL Network or something, quote tweeted, and they actually said that they would consider Brock Purdy not a game manager, but that they agreed with Cam Newton's premise and like categorization of the two categories, but that he would actually just put Brock Purdy in a different one. If you were currently, just based off of his work, so far. And maybe it's not fair to even put Brock Purdy in this conversation yet, because when we're talking about Dak and we're talking about Tom Brady and all these guys, like they have extensive careers that you can
Right.
look back on, where Brock Purdy is still very early on. If Brock Purdy was to keep this level of production for another 4 or 5 years, would you consider him a game manager? Do you consider him a game manager now or a game changer? And if he carried this level of success in the future for multiple years, would that categorization change for you, or do you think he's going to be a game manager no matter what?
I mean, I don't really value the game manager, game change. I don't try and put the one term kind of on a quarterback. To me, it doesn't matter. It's ultimately how well do you play in all aspects of the game, right? Because it's not like because I think when you try and term a quarterback or a player into one specific category, you undermine his talents in all the other categories. It's not like Purdy is a statue. It's not like Dak is a statue or anything like that. We've seen Purdy gut it out, go ahead, dive first down, scramble. We've seen the different things. We've seen him create off script. I mean, a couple of his throws in the last game was on when he's rolling out to his left after evading the pocket, he hits Debo Samuel, Brandon Ayuk for deep 30-yard passes. So I think that it's unfair to undermine him and kind of call him one moniker. It's just that's the norm because when you try and sum up his game, I guess that's what people kind of go towards do. And so that's kind of the way that I look at it. I don't try and kind of decipher it to one word or one kind of phrase because I think that there are so many different aspects that you can value out of quarterbacks games. But when you talk about the way that other people are talking about it, Purdy's physical attributes aren't going to change. I think that that's kind of the main reason people kind of categorize him in one area over another. His physical attributes aren't going to change. It's not like he's going to he's not going to, generate even
Bro,
more arm strength. He's not going to, create 4.4 speed out of nowhere. It's not like those factors are going to happen.
yeah,
It's the
that's
other
agreeing.
factors that are going to. It's him as a passer and him as a student of the game. That's really what's going to accelerate over the years. So I don't know if necessarily people are going to change their idea of him, but they might soften their stance when understanding how good of a quarterback he potentially could be in the future.
I agree. And I mean, I'm interested. It's still like kind of hilarious. Brock Purdy hasn't had an off season where he wasn't injured. So I do wonder if he will continue to add to his arm strength a little bit. Like I imagine that there's kind of like a physical limit with that within your like innate capability. And obviously he's probably worked on that his whole entire life and his whole entire career. But I know that he was able to add arm strength in that off season from draft to NFL. And last year, he wasn't. He was focusing on rehab, but he was asked about that today or yesterday in his press conference and talked about how those rehab exercises have actually helped him in his opinion be able to throw the ball differently, which has helped him with velocity. Just getting to know different smaller muscles within his arm and his shoulder, which I found to be cool insight that he touched on and potentially something he could continue to grow with. I think we've seen his arm get stronger over the year, and he even kind of said that following guy who's playing right now, Nick Mullins,
Yeah.
advice that his arm did have a bit of a dip and that it's progressively gotten better over the last couple months. But I'm going to transition when we're talking about Brock Purdy's playmakers